Good evening, Uncle Thor here. Have you heard a saying, the proof is in the pudding? It's in our nature to want to prove things, just not to accept them at face value. There's an interesting story about that. It's a story that is found in the Judeo-Christian Bible. It's in the Old Testament. It's a very pagan story that somehow slipped in there and was obviously pared down so that it fit their theology. But if you look at it, you can see that the original story, the pantheon of gods meeting in their meeting place. By the way, in the story, they also describe Behemoth and Leviathan. And if you read them just right, you can see it's the hippopotamus and crocodile. So this is an old Middle Eastern pagan story. And what happens is the chief god is bragging about one of the people who worships him, a man named Job. And he thinks Job is just wonderful. Job is a faithful follower, always singing his praises. And he just is glowing. He says, you just don't have someone like Job like I do. And another god who they call the Accuser. The Christians interpret this as the devil, but the Accuser is usually the trickster god. And he's the one who comes up and says, not so quick. It's very easy when everything's going good to be faithful. But is he really that faithful? How faithful will he be when things start going wrong? And so these two gods are going to have a little contest. And the chief god allows the trickster to send various calamities, escalating calamities down on this poor guy Job. And in the end leaves him destitute and broken. And this is kind of like a dark comedy. I mean, it's really just, this would have had people laughing because there's a lot of exaggeration and such like you find in Middle Eastern stories. But some of the things are true. One of the things that comes out of Job's friends, instead of supporting him and caring for him, they're criticizing him. They're offering him bad advice. And when he doesn't take it, they get angry and they're mean to him. But if you've ever been in really hard times, you'll find out that some people you thought were friends do the same thing. And so just as hard times prove who your real friends are, this is another story of proof. Prove that this guy really is a faithful follower. Let's test him. And so you can imagine if the chief deity were Odin, and this was Loki offering a challenge, because Loki is the tempter, the tester, the prover. He's the fault finder. The flaying of Loki is a story in which he finds faults with the other gods. And the reason for that is that finding faults is finding flaws, to see if a thing really is as good as it says, to see, or if it's too flawed and isn't good at all. So this is really what the story is. It's a story of proofing, a very amusing story nonetheless. And then you get to another thing. The proof is in the pudding. We all demand proof. You see, you go in a store, you want to buy products, you want some kind of evidence that they are what the promoter, the advertiser, the maker claims them to be. So, you seek proof. Cars, for instance, are tested. They're tested by various groups to see if the manufacturer's claims really are there, or if they're unsafe, or they're too costly, or they have too many faults, they break down easily. So we all seek proof. And that's what this story of Job is. Just proving a man and proving the claim of a god. Again, it's a humorous story, but the principle behind it is very real. If you do collecting, for instance, you need to prove things because there's a lot of shadiness among the collecting hobbies. People who collect World War II memorabilia, militaria, and I knew some guys who did, and the problem they had was there were so many counterfeits. And they had to learn how to authenticate things on their own because the dealers aren't always up and up. Or the dealers may not know themselves. Same with collectible model trains. They have to authenticate that this is the real thing. And they can do this by looking at the paint. If the paint is too good, they know that it's not a genuine old train, things like that. But any type of collecting you need to authenticate. Just like when you get involved in a deal, they tell you to get references. Find your own references to authenticate that this person who comes to you is everything he claims to be. So proofing is a natural part of what we do. Now, one of the things, and I just want to touch this briefly, anything that is true has a way in which it is true. And I'll leave you with this thought. If anything really is spiritual, there must be some practical outworking of it. There must be some way we can actually come to appreciate that this actually exists. Science does the same thing. There may be a hypothesis, but you want proof that it exists. So what we want is an outworking, something that tells us this is the real thing. Just a thought. And remember, you don't want to have Job's fate. You don't have to be proven that much. Again, this is Uncle Thor. Have a good one.